All right, hi class. This is Mr. DeCoco with video lesson number 6, Thursday, April 9th, the week of April 6th through the 10th. As you may have heard, we have had our spring break canceled. So it may seem like you've been on break this whole time anyway, but it's going to be more of the same thing next week. Teachers will be posting videos, questions, lessons on their classroom pages. Just keep checking, keep doing what you need to do, keep connected. In 3 weeks, hopefully, we're back to normal. We're scheduled to go back on April 29th, which is a Wednesday. And when we get back, as I stated in a previous video, we should be on chapter 10 or 11, depending. So just three things I want to mention in this video. I want to try to keep it short. I want to just quickly review the 3 extremely important points of last lesson. Preview the War of 1812, because that's what you're going to be working on for next week, and just some directions of how to do that stuff. So last video cast, I went over the causes of the War of 1812. And really, the War of 1812 is what your classwork is for today. What's going to be assigned today and should be done by next week. Does not due today. The War of 1812 was brewing for about 8 years. 3 things really caused the War of 1812. 3 specific things. First, we were having trouble with the natives out west. The British were helping the natives. Settlers were being attacked, and settlers were attacking natives. Battles were being fought between the U.S. Army and the natives. And even though we were defeating the natives in battle, in a way they were becoming stronger, because the natives learned that if they're united, they're better off than fighting the United States small tribe at a time. So the small tribes started uniting into big forces. And secondly, they realized that if they got British help, they would be much more dangerous to the United States, especially by getting British guns. So they started trading with the British. They started forming alliances with them. And even though we were beating the natives and pushing them further west, they were actually becoming a greater threat. They were becoming stronger. We blamed the British for this. So this definitely is a cause of the War of 1812. The biggest cause of all, though, was the fact that the British were pulling over our ships on the high seas and kidnapping our sailors. So this had been going on for years. Despite our complaints and actions, the British would not stop doing it. So this was angering Americans perhaps even greater than the fact that the British were helping the natives. And then finally, in the United States at the time, especially amongst people in the South and the West, there was this desire for even more land, as if we didn't have enough. If you remember, the United States more than doubled in size with the purchase of Louisiana. But that still didn't seem to be enough for some people. They wanted more land. And there were southern and western farmers who thought that a war with Great Britain would be easy, and it would be relatively easy to take Canada from Great Britain. Canada had a lot of land and good farmland in the south of it. So when you put those 3 things together, trouble with the natives, trouble with the British on the high seas, and a desire for more land, you had support for a war. You had people pushing for war with Great Britain. These people were called war hawks. Eventually, war hawks took control of the government, and we got a war hawk president named James Madison. And in July of 1812, we declare war on Great Britain. Now, tonight, you're going to learn about the War of 1812. The War of 1812, of course, started in 1812. It went to 1815, so it lasted 3 years. And to sum up the war in a nutshell, at first it went badly. Then it started getting better for the United States. Then it went badly again. And then it abruptly ended. But the biggest, most significant battle of the war happens after the war ends. So it's a very strange war. And let me explain a few things before I continue. Today, the War of 1812 is relatively forgotten It's rarely talked about. Some people don't even know what it is. But some significant things come out of the War of 1812. For example, our national anthem is one of them. But you're going to learn about how that war went, and you'll read about the details in today's lesson. But the very beginning of the war, of course, the United States is very overconfident. We think it's going to be an easy war. We think we're very well prepared. But in reality, it's not going to be an easy war, and we're totally not prepared for it. And it goes very badly at first. We invade Canada twice, and both invasions fail miserably. Not only do we not take any land in Canada, we actually lose American land to the British. We lose, for example, the city of Detroit. Well, back then it wasn't a city. It was more of a town. We do score some big victories on the Great Lakes and some naval battles by beating British naval forces. That at least prevents Great Britain from invading the western United States. We also beat the natives out west, and the leader of the Native Alliance, his name is Tecumseh, he's killed in one of those battles. When that happens, Native Alliance falls apart, and the tribes go back to disagreeing and arguing and not being united. And one by one, our armies defeat the tribes. So we start winning in the West. Just as it looks like we're going to win the war, though, things go very badly again. Great Britain defeats France in Europe. Keep in mind, this whole time they were fighting France in a European war. And once they defeat France, they're able to send thousands upon thousands of soldiers to the United States to fight us. And some of those are the best British soldiers, the most experienced. And the minute the British start sending soldiers to the United States, more so, they start beating us very badly. The low point is when they attack, capture, and destroy Washington, D.C. The Capitol building, the president's mansion are burned to the ground. In fact, the reason why we don't call it presidential mansion today and we call the president's house the White House is because after the war, when they were rebuilding the city, the cleanup crews were trying to scrub the burn marks off the stone of the president's house. The cleanup crews got so frustrated because no matter how much they scrubbed and cleaned, they couldn't get the burn marks off the stone. They decided to hide it by painting the entire house white. So it was the only white building in Washington at the time. So over the years, people stopped calling it the presidential mansion. They just called it the White House because if you were looking for it, you just looked for the big white house. Later on, other buildings too would be painted white or built white. And that's how that happens, in case you were wondering. But Washington, D.C. is attacked, burned down. It would have been worse had it not been for a large rainstorm that passed through Washington the night the British were burning it. So luckily, some parts of the city were saved. Baltimore, a city that's very close to Washington, was also attacked. During that battle, this is called the Battle of Fort McHenry, an American named Francis Scott Key was inspired to write a poem about how no matter how much the British attacked the fort, the American flag still flew. Later on this poem, we put the song, and today we know it as the Star-Spangled Banner. Basically, in 1814, 2 years after the war starts, Great Britain and the USA both realize the war is pretty stupid. Both countries realize they're getting nothing out of the war. They're just spending a lot of money and getting a lot of people killed. So they both come to an agreement to end the war. And they meet in a place called Ghent, Belgium. And they sign a treaty called the Treaty of Ghent, and that officially ends the War of 1812. Unfortunately, though, the biggest, bloodiest battle of the war is going to be fought a month later at a place called the Battle of New Orleans. New Orleans was so far away from Ghent that the news of the war ending didn't get there in time. So the American and British forces in New Orleans had no clue the war was over. And what happens is on January 8th, 1815, a huge battle is fought. And it's an extremely lopsided win for the United States. Our army, under the control of the command of General Andrew Jackson, defeat the British. Over 2,000 British soldiers are killed and wounded, and only about 200 Americans are killed or wounded. Most of those wounded. I think the death of Americans was like 20 something. So Jackson looked like a hero, a genius. And even though the war was over, people didn't really pay much attention to that. They just saw this as a big, huge win. And many Americans felt we had won the war, although really no one won the War of 1812. It was more of a draw. And this battle, even though it happens after the war, is going to change the course of American history, because 13 years later, Andrew Jackson's going to use his fame to run for president. He's going to become president, and American history is going to change because of Andrew Jackson. He's going to be a very different president, our first extremely controversial president. If you think John Adams was controversial, that was nothing compared to Andrew Jackson. So we'll learn more about Andrew Jackson in future lessons. But that's what you'll learn about when you read about the War of 1812 in your textbook. There's a short reading link attached, and there's only 4 questions to do, so not a whole lot of work. So that's what you want to do for next Tuesday. By next Tuesday, you want to make sure that you read section 4 of chapter 9. You want to also read the link of the War of 1812 summary. It's like a several paragraph summary. I attached a link to the classroom page. And there's 2 videos that you may find entertaining or interesting. One is a music parody poking fun of the War of 1812 by that guy, Mr. Betts. And then the other one is another video by Mr. Betts that's more of a history of the Star-Spangled Banner. And he rewrites it a little bit to a more modern song. So that's what's due for next Tuesday. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy. I hope everybody enjoys this weekend if you're celebrating Easter or Passover or Good Friday tomorrow. And I hope to see you soon. Take care. Talk to you later.